So for an entry level tech, I would expect you to be somewhere in the $30 to $40 an hour range. And this is moving like legitimately into chillers and you're genuinely getting involved. It's not just something you're helping with here and there, but you're actually pursuing a proper chiller technician role of some kind where this is going to be one of the primary things you work on. Not the only thing we work on. We have to get involved in other stuff most of the time, but it's our primary focus. As a mid-level tech, somewhere between the $40 to $50 range should be pretty reasonable. By this time, you should be getting more proficient with things. You're still going to need a little bit of support. You still need some training. You're not the overall top dog of anything. But as a senior level guy, as the primary chiller technician on a team, somewhere between the 50 to 70 plus range, and this is per hour, should be very reasonable, and that should be something you should be able to stand on and expect. And you also need to be able to bring the value to the company and help explain to them why it's worth that. I want to preface with a lot of this is me here in Texas. This is some pretty standard market values that I'm used to and that I've done. Worked as an operations manager for a time and just being in this chiller market here in Texas my entire career. But I found that even with talking with a lot of other states and other people, this salary range is, or hourly range, is pretty close to standard. There may be some, or there will be some variances as you go from state to state in different regions and stuff, even maybe inside of the state. Most of the time, a lot of our work's going to be the most dense in the heavy metro areas and the heavy populations, the bigger cities. So a lot of what we do is there, and the wages are typically a bit higher there in my experience. Versus, it's not that there's not stuff out in the sticks and stuff, but um, usually there's not as much of it, and you're going to have a harder time getting the same level of pay. Now, as that entry level technician, you're going to be spending a lot of your time working on air cooled based stuff, and you should be able to get your head around scrolls and reciprocating if you even still run into any pretty quickly. Those are very, very basic sides of our systems, but it's the screws that you're really going to have to start focusing on and getting your mind wrapped around the process of a screw. And that's where you're going to, the better you get with screws specifically, and the more self-sustained you get, the faster you're going to push to that mid-level point, and you're going to increase that salary or that hourly wage for yourself. Now, as a mid-level guy, you should pretty well have air cooled as a whole wrapped up in a bow. Like you need to have a really strong handle of that and moving into more of a water cooled side, specifically centrifugal. And your biggest focus and challenge for yourself is getting your head around centrifugal equipment and understanding what is needed, how it works. And by this time, you should have already been studying. By the time you're moving into that mid-level range and that $40 to $50 an hour, you should be able to do some basic service calls on water cooled, on centrifugals, and you're going to need a minor amount of support. With that entry level tech, you're going to need a lot of support and a lot of training. You just don't know enough about what's happening in this equipment to be fully self-sustainable. Don't expect to be. At the same time, you mid-level, like you're still going to need some training. You should only need fairly minor support overall. Especially like you shouldn't need hardly any support on the air cooled side. Most of what you're going to need would be as you get deeper and deeper into dealing with centrifugal issues and the things we come across. That's where whatever support you're getting, it really should be in that zone somewhere. Um, and then as you move into that senior role where you're breaking 50 plus an hour and that scales quite heavily, um, you really like you should be the guy. It's not that you never need help, but whatever help you do need should be pretty high level. And most of the time, it's going to be something factory level. Like you need the factory guys to show up and who are at the top of their own teams and their senior guys to come in and y'all put your heads together lots of the time to try to figure out what's going on. And this is saying that you don't work for a factory. If you already work for a factory, then slightly different variables here. But the key point there is for you to get to that senior point, you got to be the guy. Like for you to hit that top tier pay, you really need to be able to own your space and do whatever it is, whether it be centrifugal, screw, water cooled, air cooled. Chillers are your thing, and you should be able to really understand them in and out as best you can. There's a lot that goes into that. It takes a lot of training. It takes a lot of time. and a lot of experience. It's not an easy thing to achieve, and you really got to bring your stuff to the table because a company can't carry somebody who thinks they know more than they do for very long and be successful. Now, there's a few things we have to keep in mind when dealing with these level of wages. Margins become extremely critical, and we also need to be mindful and respectful to the company's margins. Now, the company also has to do a good job in pricing themselves and controlling margins and overhead and things as a whole. So it's not just on you to think about this, but I think as you begin to advance in these things, these are just stuff to keep in mind. And if you're getting a lot of pushback, just remember that they've got stuff they're trying to balance on their side too. Now, one of the most effective things I've seen is having a senior or a chiller tech rate specifically. So when you as specifically the senior technicians, typically your entry and mid-level techs aren't usually as big of a burden on the customer and the financial statements. It's you senior technicians that it's really gonna you have a big impact because of just your scale of hourly wage. And so charging a premium for your time is many times necessary to where you've got your own separate rate scale for when you have to show up and whatever's going on is a big enough issue you need to be there. You're getting the customer's getting charged for that extra time and experience that you're there to do what you do. And that's how a lot of companies are able to justify that higher rate. And so if you are in a situation where you feel like you're getting to those upper level points and you're starting to see that scaling, and you want the company to be able to grow with you, but at the current rate, maybe you're getting some pushback or trouble with it, but y'all are getting into chillers and you have a chiller side of it, but you want to help see it grow. Well, one of the big things to do that is putting systems in place. And you don't have to call it a chiller tech rate. You could call it a senior tech rate if you really wanted to, but putting a separate pay scale in place for those higher level positions in order to help with, covering retention, covering margins. It also helps communicate to the customer that, listen, the guy you got showing up, this is our top brass. This is everything we have that's going to be able to help your situation. And I find that a lot of customers actually seek that. And a lot of customers, when they find out that you have that structure, many of them only want people in that pay scale to show up because they're willing to pay the extra price to get that level of service. And then the ones who don't, well, when they struggle and we have trouble working through problems, and they understand that, well, the literal top guys of our team aren't the ones who are able to be there. And if you want them here, those come at an extra premium. And like there's a whole balance to that. And it's up to the customer to decide what they're comfortable with. And the company has to be cautious with handling these things and marking the prices and being competitive in the market. But these are very competitive rates, in my opinion. And this is where we're at here in 2024 for our industry. These are the scales of rates, that I existed in as well. And I came up through. If you are serious about trying to grow yourself and you are serious about seeking this development, let me help you, please. Go check out Chiller Academy and Introduction to Chiller specifically, and let's work together and become a part of a larger chiller community inside of there. We've got several hundred students at this point, and I'd love to see you get involved, get into the conversations, and let me help you guide through this process and become a chiller tech and help you work your way up these scales. And if you're in a situation where you're dealing with this salary talk or this, you're trying to get your raise and what you feel your worth is, well, then come in there and get some feedback and see, are your expectations too high, or should you have them a little higher? Hey, this is where I'm at. This is what I can do. Da, 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 da. What do y'all think? And let's get in there and let's have that conversation and maybe help you create a solution that your employer that you have could work with. Your manager, your service manager may be able to take up to higher up management and say, hey, listen, we've got this. We need this. This is where we're at. Let's try to make something work and help us as a company move forward. And you could be a big part of that conversation. We could work with you through that and have a community to support you and back you with people who are in the middle of this, just like you are. We're all trying to just work together in this process. Anyway, chilleracademy.com. With that, MTT, make the time for your family, for your spouse, and for your kids. I'll see you later.